Brian, we got Sandhya on the line here. What do you want to ask her?
What do we do afterwards and how do we scale it hypothetically up to having $1 billion under asset management?
Yeah, I would just break that down into smaller tasks, right? Anything that seems like a big task. If I have to have $1 billion in assets in 5 years, usually it's not really a linear function. Usually the first few deals are the slowest and then it goes up exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that you figure out what are the biggest roadblocks and what are the biggest things that you can do yourself. So if I wanted $1 billion in assets in 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
I would want to get to at least 100 million in my first 18 months or so. And so how do I get there? What can I offer? What can somebody else do? So figure out your partnerships, your roadblocks, and then find people with complementary skills so that your weakness is covered by their strengths.
Hey, I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different from everything else out there. I bring together new and aspiring investors on each and every episode and let the aspiring investors ask the questions that they need answered. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably have the same questions. So before you get to this episode that we have prepared for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. I'm very excited for today's show. We have Sandhya Seshadri on with us today, who is a second-time podcast guest coming on as our experienced investor again, and then Brian Robles as our aspiring investor. So guys, welcome to the show today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having us.
so much.
Awesome. So Sandhya, you're going to be up first. And anybody, if you want to go back and listen to her previous episode, it was episode number 37, released in September of 2020. So we have a lot of catching up to do. Sandhya, tell us a little bit about yourself and how things have gone since, I don't know, about September 2020.
A lot of things have happened since then. We were in the middle of COVID back then.
Yeah.
A lot of things have opened up since then, which is great. I have acquired a few more properties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which is my primary market. My former experience as an engineer helps me with underwriting and project management, which is all essential.
Yep.
And my market is still Dallas-Fort Worth. I've acquired about 7 more properties since we last chatted, and I've still continued to invest passively with a lot of my retirement funds from my previous W-2. So it's been great. There have, of course, been a few nice challenges with all that the Fed has been up to in the past year, but I'm still very excited to be in this business.
Yeah, definitely a lot of challenges. I mean, it's like they greased things, a couple of years ago and made things like super, super easy. And now it's, just the opposite. So Dallas-Fort Worth, tell me why you like Dallas-Fort Worth.
Well, I moved here a long time ago, 32 years ago, and this is the market I know best.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one, is being, investing in your own backyard, because I don't have to underwrite 200 deals. As soon as I get an address, I know if I'm interested in the location or not. But secondly, it's got all the major factors we look for, which is in a landlord-friendly state, diversity of jobs, huge population and in economic growth. Every week, every day almost, I hear about yet another company relocating to this area or expanding in this area. So it's got all the right numbers in that sense. The other thing is, of course, any property you look at, you always want to find the ones where the rents are far below market rents, because that's your primary bread and butter for any deal. And I'm able to still find a lot of value add deals, which is what I do.
There's something to be said about investing in your backyard. And I know there's a lot of people looking to go from wherever they're at in the nation to Dallas to invest because of the dynamics there. And you're very fortunate to actually live there. Truth said, I think anybody who's interested in that market could actually move there themselves. But anyway, a lot of goodness there. Let's talk a little bit about what you did before coming into multifamily, because I know you had a really, really solid career prior to that.
Yeah, this is, I would say, my third gig. Like most Asian geeks, I had strong math skills. So I got an engineering degree, got a corporate job right here in Dallas, where I went to college at SMU and then got into a nice job doing technical work first. And then I realized all the business types were making all the decisions and they were telling me what to do. And I had to understand how they do their financial analysis, market analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So my company was kind enough to pay for me to get a part-time MBA. That's where I got all my investment knowledge and formed a nice network with an investor club, et cetera. And that's where I learned to invest in the stock market. So I went full time into the stock market after my corporate job once I had children, because I wanted to be very involved in raising my children, etc. So a couple of hours a day of trading was enough. And then the rest of the day I was available for my kiddos. And that worked really well until I was actually quite successful as a stock market investor. And now I was like, we're paying too much in taxes because my husband had the W-2 and I was looking for real estate. I was trying to get involved in real estate, found that every time I analyzed a single family rental in the area, the margins just weren't big enough for me to justify signing a loan and dealing with our favorite 4Ts: tenants, toilets, trash, and termites. So I just didn't want to get that phone call, of a leaky toilet on Thanksgiving Day kind of scenario. So I shied away from single family. And then a friend told me about multifamily, and I attended a weekend event by my mentor, Brad Sumrock, and I was sold. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is the kind of asset management, project management I've already got the experience doing. And this is my local market, seems to be really great for it. So why not? And so I hopped into it about 4 years ago and started by investing passively with my retirement money from my previous W-2 to get to know sponsors, to get to know how to underwrite. And I use the analogy of a plane ride. First you want to be passenger on a plane, which is what's passive investing. And then you want to be a co-pilot and then a pilot. And so that's exactly what I did. In my first deal, I joined experienced partners who were out of state, and I could add value to them by being the local expert and boots on the ground. And when COVID hit, that was particularly handy, and I learned a whole bunch of asset management. So I would say I was a co-pilot there, and then now I'm the lead pilot, and I bring on other co-pilots, and it's been great. And I still continue to invest passively. So that's a summary of my real estate journey today.
I agree. There's a lot of benefits coming in as an LP first, if you have the means to do it, obviously, but a lot of benefits to coming in as an LP. And I like the analogy with the pilots. I flew back from, Louisville, Kentucky, and spent a little bit of time on planes, but I like that, be a passenger first, move to co-pilot, and then move to, the pilot seat. So if you don't mind, let's just talk about that as far as your journey goes. You talked about investing passively first. Tell us how you got into syndications as the co-pilot, using your own words, and then how that's changed now that you are the actual pilot.
Having invested passively, I already knew what I liked about various sponsors because I, put my retirement money across several different deals, many of which were in the Dallas area that I visited, that I spoke with the sponsors, that I said, please let me know if you're doing a major CapEx project. That's very interesting to me. I'll show up, etc. So I was trying to be a useful and an actively involved passive investor. And that's where within this mentoring program is where I met my future partners. They did not need me at all. They were experienced. They had done this before, but they had no presence in Texas and Dallas. And I said, I could be so useful to you. So if you want to get your first deal, always when it involves other people's money, I would say go with somebody else who has the experience so you don't make costly mistakes when it involves other people's hard-earned money. That's number one. And the second thing is, like being a co-pilot, in case there's a lot of turbulence, you've got somebody else to help you, without you getting into a panic mode. And then how can you add value to them so that they take you on? What do you have in your toolbox that's of value to somebody? And find so if I try to go with other local partners, I wouldn't be as useful to them as I was to somebody who's out of state, who would have to travel each time to check on the property. And I could be their eyes and ears. I could FaceTime them literally while I'm speaking to a contractor or I'm on site. So there's a lot of different ways that you could be useful. So figure out how you can be adding value and why somebody should partner with you.
Yep. Awesome. And now that you're in the lead syndicator role or the pilot role, I won't put words in your mouth, but the pilot role, now what does that look like for you?
I love finding deals because, again, I'm in the local market. I have 4 brokers who literally live in my neighborhood. Nice. And so they know my little box and my criteria. So if something comes along that fits, now I'm going to a minimum of at least 150 doors. I used to in the past, accept 70, 80 doors also to get my foot in the door. So again, the larger you scale, you can do fewer deals. So figure out your criteria. That's what I say first. And so I specify the type of deal I want, the price per door, certain locations. And I say, don't even bother if it's in these locations, right? So I've done all of that. And then I love to underwrite. So even if a partner underwrites it and brings me a deal, I have to independently underwrite it. And then because the deals are in Dallas, another thing I like to do is I like to do my own drive-bys and comp analysis. So I visit all the comparative properties if I'm serious, right?
Mhm.
Like I said, I don't have to screen 200 deals to find one. I already know based on location, price per door, etc. So a brief drive-by will give me that information. And then I spend about half to one full day just driving and visiting the comps to drill down. I sit in the leasing offices, never go in the beginning of the month, but I sit there and I do my own questions, my analysis. I take Starbucks gift cards to thank the leasing people for spending time with me, etc.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
then I drill down. So now I really know, how does my subject property differentiate? How is it better or worse? And what are some, opportunities available? So then you take all that, you get a budget from a PM company and you underwrite the deals, and that's how you get ready to make offers.
Yeah.
So once that's done, I need to figure out who can bring me the capital as well, right?
Yep.
Before you make offers, it's always a good idea to figure out your capital stack. How much can I raise? How much can my partners raise? Do we need to bring anybody else? Because certainty of closing is so important now more than ever. And so that's how you make a strong impression and build your reputation with brokers. So do not be scrambling for capital last minute, and there's a whole bunch of things you could talk on that topic. Once you do that, asset management, right? That's the bulk of the work. So from when the deal closes for the next 3, 4, 5 years, that hold period, you've got to make the business plan come to life. So having that connection with a PM company, making sure the property management company believes in your business plan. Yes, you do this, you will get this in your rents. Or yes, this source of other income is possible in this property. So we recently did a big exterior paint. This property looked rather hideous with red colored exterior paint. And
I love
we
red.
changed it.
No, not for apartments.
Not this stop sign red color plastered over all the buildings, right? So we went with our favorite theme colors of the Dallas Cowboys. No, I don't want to talk about the game, but our navy, silver, gray, and white color is really popular. And so a lot of people in my apartments will be walking around with Dallas Cowboys here. So we went with those colors because, again, it's a proven color scheme. I don't have to think about it. And yes, if you refresh the exterior look, your property will be considered a nicer property and get more rent. That was something validated by a PM company who was running the property next door. So that's very important, is to make sure whoever you pick as your property management company has a local presence already in that submarket. That's very important.
Well, I mean, you threw out a ton of gems there, and I had a hard time keeping track. But, one thing that I do want to highlight is I have a lot of calls with people who are interested in learning how to do this. And I ask them, what markets are they focused on? And sometimes I hear, well, the markets I'm looking at are Florida, Texas, and Oklahoma, and I'm scratching my head thinking there are a lot of markets in those 3 states, but you're focusing on one. And what I'd like to point out is all you need is an address. You said that up to the beginning, and I appreciate you saying that. All you need is an address. And whether it's something you want or not. And that's because you know your market better than a lot of other people do. You know it so well that all you need is an address, and I love how you say you're spending several hours, getting to know the neighborhood, sitting down with leasing agents. And I think your LinkedIn post from today or late last week actually talked about secret shopping properties too. So that's something that comes up a lot when I'm talking with aspiring investors, but there is a lot of goodness that comes out of focusing on one market, then oh, you know what, I'm looking in Florida, I'm looking in Texas, and pick another state. So appreciate that. So another thing, and let's dial down on one of the properties you guys done. You mentioned the paint job, but let's pick a property and talk a little more in detail about how the project has worked, what it was supposed to be, and just go from there.
So we can talk about this specific property where I referred to the paint job. It's located in a submarket called Carrollton, which is a great location. And actually, when I first moved to the United States over 3 decades ago, I stayed within 2 miles of that location. So I know that area really, really well. Like, I know all the streets, I know how it's evolved, and it's within a 15-minute drive of my house. So it's, again, local market knowledge made me realize, it's Carrollton, I'm going to go after it. So I didn't need to think. And so, like, boom, as soon as you see the listing, or actually a lot of brokers now send me the listings even before they officially listed. They say, are you interested? I'm like, yes, I'm interested. And then, within 2 days, I'm like, there, can I go see the property, etc. So that's very important for you to have that local market knowledge so that you can pounce, when you found your target. So that property.
if I can, going back to my last, what I said about your comments, having that focus gets you those relationships. If you're dealing with, once again, Texas and Florida, and you have like lots of markets on your plate, you're never going to get those calls from the brokers, my opinion. Anyway, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, perfect.
Yeah.
Important. If your broker knows your little box and your criteria, and you've already acquired properties in the area, or you're partnered with someone who does, then you're much more likely to get awarded those deals. So that's very important. So I got to tour the property before the general listing of people could tour it. And so me and my partners were able to make an offer and get it under contract before it ever went to the local market and, broadcast to everybody else. Because again, I knew the price they wanted. I knew how I could get there. And my local knowledge, again, I shopped every one of the other properties, not even secretly. I actually go sit down at the leasing offices and tell them, hey, I represent a group. We're interested in buying properties here. We'd like to know more about you. And I've already done my homework from looking at CoStar. So I know the, property management company, et cetera, what they're charging. And so I have a specific list of questions by property as to why I want to know more about this amenity here versus there. And that knowledge really helps you. So in this property, we got it under contract. We did our due diligence. We knew there'd be deferred maintenance. It was an older property. And so your purpose in due diligence is to bring out all the trades so that you get a thorough listing of all your deferred maintenance that you must do, as well as the potential for interiors. So the property management company was already on board with us. They came along, they looked inside. And so we all now have a nicely, finely refined business plan that we're all in agreement on. And that's so important. And along with that, all the trades have already told you, this is what it'll cost. They know all the materials that we need for it. So you can line all that up so that day one, you're ready to sort of execute your CapEx plan. One unique thing that happened with that property was that we were able to get in on an encore rebate. We closed this property in November of 2021. And so if we installed some air conditioners before the end of the year, we could get it at a huge discount. I think we paid like less than $1,000 per air conditioner installed compared to $3,500 to $4,000. But we had to execute it right away. So we had to come up and prepay certain things, sign certain contracts, and all of the install had to happen by that timeline. But that was a huge deal for Dallas, for Texas, because our summers are really hot. So saving that kind of money was definitely worth it, because it's not just the cost, but it's also the headaches for your maintenance people. So now they could be serving tenants in another way with other problems and not have to ever worry about AC issues. So you want to do things like that. We knew we were going to do the exterior paint. We just hated that stop sign red color. So that was on our list. We already had the painter contractor and all that figured out. We knew what it was going to cost us to do the exterior paint. And then what we did not know was how much extra framing we'd have to do depending on the damage they found underneath. So that definitely went a little bit over budget, and we had to deal with that. So not everything goes smoothly or perfectly. The project certainly didn't finish in time. It dragged out because of all the weather delays, etc. So it kind of stretched itself. It took about 4.5 months to complete everything. And then we were ready to rebrand it with new signage. And so now it was a new look, new feel. Everybody loved it. The existing residents renewed. There were some residents who had lived in, who had moved out of this property, and then they came back seeing how visually nicer it is. We updated the leasing office again because its interiors were also this, stop sign red color that we updated. So a lot of the CapEx projects have done really well. So what has not done so well? Because, not everything goes perfectly. Some projects cost us more money. And secondly, our interest rates went up because we signed up for a bridge loan and our mortgage payment went up significantly. So the great thing is, because of this fantastic location, all the things within our control, right, which is your revenue and your NOI, your operating expenses, they're doing very well. They were ahead of what we had projected. So by month 8, month 9, we were well into year 2 numbers, but it still got us with this mortgage. So we're not in trouble with the lender because we're able to have a high enough NOI that it's plenty to pay for the mortgage. Of course, our rate cap insurance has already kicked in because nobody anticipated such steep interest rate increases. And so the only, shall we say, not so great thing is that our distributions are far less than what we had projected because the mortgage company now is taking all that.
Exactly.
But if we hold on, we're not in any kind of a distress in that sense of, we can still keep the property very much afloat. And we just have to hold for another year, year and a half and see what it looks like to refi or sell. And
I appreciate you actually talking about that, because a lot of people, come
Yep.
on podcasts and they tell you roses and everything. And I mean, you guys
Nope.
put a lot of work into it. And
Mhm.
it's something that a lot of people aren't talking about specifically is, what happens to deals when, with those variable rates. And fortunately, number
Yes.
one, you have rate cap insurance, which is something that I wouldn't do a variable rate loan without. Number two, you guys added enough value and your projections were conservative enough that you've got room to take care of it. And number three, you're just not distributing as much, so
Mhm.
so instead of distributing money, the lenders are getting that money, so
Yes.
that's really the difference here is you
Mhm.
guys. And the fourth thing that I'll mention is something that you said exactly, and it's the beauty of real estate. It's just that buy real estate and wait concept.
Yep.
It's
Mhm.
okay, right now is not a great time to sell. We're paying our bills, we're paying our mortgage. Let's just hold on and
Mhm.
we'll be fine. So
Yeah.
love it.
We're just 14 months since we acquired it. I
Mhm.
mean, this was a 5-year hold period.
Yep.
So investors know that this is illiquid and they got to be patient. And, if you buy real estate and wait, the opportunity is going to be there when
Absolutely.
we have increased its value. And at that time, we'll see if it makes sense to refi and hold on to it or
Yep.
actually sell it.
Yep.
But
A lot of options there.
Mhm.
Question, and shifting gears slightly here. What is your big burning why? What's your motivation for what you're doing?
So on the big picture, as far as helping others, there's a motivation, and then there's a very selfish motivation.
Yep.
So the big picture is that when I moved to this country, I also lived in an apartment, and I went to a private college, SMU, with a
Mhm.
very fancy neighborhood, Highland Park of Dallas, and
Okay.
I saw the beautiful homes and the lives they lived, etc. And I want to bring that neighborhood feel back to these apartments. I
Yeah.
feel like the neighborhood cul-de-sac feel where you build a community where everybody watches out for each other, etc., is what I want to build in these communities, which is why I do a lot of the community building activities. And I focus a lot more of my bonuses and incentives for staff on renewals rather
Mhm.
than new leases, because retaining the right tenants, taking care of them, making that single mom feel safe living in my
Yeah.
apartments, with 2 kids is important. The very selfish reason is, as an Asian geek, I have 2 children who are bright in their own ways, and I
Mhm.
have one who has reached cruising altitude and she's going to be fine on her own. But
Mhm.
my second child may not want to go the traditional path to college, W-2, etc. And I
Yep.
really want to have a backup plan for him if he wants to get in, to have rental income from real
Yeah.
estate, and to learn this business, work alongside with me, and at some point take over.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And you used the word Asian geek a couple of times. So,
Mhm.
it sounds like a term you've embraced.
Yes, I love my math. I love my spreadsheets, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with that.
I've got 2 degrees in math.
Mhm.
So I think, the geek word applies to me as well. But okay, I can nerd out on spreadsheets all day long.
Yes.
All right. So last question. And what's next for you?
I hope to slowly
Mhm.
acquire the right properties at good value and increase. So I want to do larger and fewer deals, not
Mhm.
try to acquire 10 properties, but rather have 2 properties, maybe larger, that I can babysit and manage really well, because I enjoy the asset management aspect of it too, and
Yep.
returning value to my investors instead of being scattered in 10 different places.
Yep. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of wisdom to that. Having one complex with 200 units is so much easier to manage than 10, 20 unit complexes. And
Mhm.
as a syndicator, we are essentially paid by that AUM. That
Mhm.
assets under management number determines how much we get as syndicators, more than anything else, more than unit count. So you're basically going for larger, more quality, and it's less work for you, and it's actually a
Mhm.
lot more stable returns for the investor. So I love it.
So that's one thing. And then on the other side is, I've always
Mhm.
wanted to write, and I've always wanted to write a book. And that was a
Mhm.
very, very scary prospect for me.
Yep.
So I decided to join a group. And so we have each written one chapter of a book, and it's termed Next Level Your Life. And
Mhm.
so if you do a search for Next Level on Amazon, you will find that book.
Okay.
And I've written a chapter. So if you want to learn more about me and some really amazing, inspiring folks like Tom Ziegler
Mhm.
and amazing authors like that, I would highly recommend, of course, to purchase this book on Amazon.
All right. And I'm going to put a link to that book in the show notes. So before we hop off, we got to make sure that I got the right link and everything else. So, all right. That said, we're going to shift gears again. We got Bryan Robles on the line. And there we go. Bryan, first of all, love your first name. Second of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. First, just want to say thank you real quick to Sandhya. Absolutely, knowledge bombs, knowledge bombs. I do have some questions I'd like to circle around to, but I'd like to introduce myself.
Yeah, please do.
Bryan. The only difference is that he spells it with an I and I spell it with a Y. So
yeah, I mean, if I were to go back to grade school, we'd discuss which one is better. But anyway.
All right. Yeah. So I'm about 27 years old. About 7 years ago or so, I kind of came across the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Since then, I've been a musician for as long as I can remember, playing tuba and doing that in regional Mexican music as well as concert music. And it really shifted my mindset because, as a musician, we're trading our time, for money. And then at a certain point, you realize that you can only do so much as one singular person. You could only make so much returns. So that's what really sifted me into, kind of that investor mindset and really got me into that. Me, humbly, we come from humble backgrounds. My mother was an immigrant. My father was an immigrant. So that makes me first generation. My big burning why would be first to help provide for them, let them know that all their sacrifice has been worth it. Second, and it's something that I really love to share, to be completely honest, is that I would love to be able to fund a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's able to impact 1 million people in over 20 countries by just showing them that it's possible to be the best person you could be physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, and financially. Over this entire time, that's just kind of what I've been working on. That's my background. That's where I come from. And just finding a vehicle to get me there.
This is a great vehicle for that, so very, very much appreciated. And, you pretty much already answered your big burning why question as well. But is there anything you want to add to what you said about your big burning why?
I want to mention that, for a very long time, they say the people who you hang around with really affects, your outcome in life. And, for a very long time, you don't really think about it. You just kind of go about it, like, oh, this is fun. This is a lot of fun. I love this. And it's not until you meet someone or you read something that really changes your mindset. And that's what's really changed my trajectory. I've been sober since 2019, and I'm looking to make an impact in my life and all those around me. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Now we get to my favorite part of the podcast. Bryan, we got Sandhya on the line here. What do you want to ask her?
I did a little bit of research on your bio. I know you do a lot of speaking engagements. So what pulled you into speaking? Why do you love it so much? And how does one become a speaker?
I have never been afraid of public speaking. So right from when I was a child through grade school, etc., that's a fear I've not had. And I think the first time it was in a podcast 3 years ago. Actually, it was Whitney Sewell. He was so kind. I had no idea what he was and his expertise, etc. And I just met him and he's like, you have an interesting story. You should come on my podcast kind of thing. And that's where it started. And then once you do a few of these, other people call you. So you no longer have to seek them out. And I think I enjoy sharing my story because the first few times I got a lot of feedback that what I said was useful and it helped somebody else. And nowadays, that's how I learn as well, is by listening to podcasts more than actually sitting down and reading a book. It's either an Audible or a podcast. So I think to stay current with the world, that's a really good way to listen and learn. And that's my media. So if I have something to give back, and the host invites me and says I can be useful to their audience, I love sharing my lessons learned to help collapse other people's time frames and also to give them a very realistic perspective of what it is. It's not all, roses and sunshine and perfect all the time. And for them to realize that, no, this is not an easy business, but if you stay consistent and you have the right priorities, which is, in my case, take care of your residents, take care of your investors. And if every decision you make is based on that, everything else will fall in line. So it's also giving people that helping hand and courage to jump and invest into something else like real estate. Like I needed others to help me get into this business. So I want to help others get into this business and realize that it's not just about making money. You can actually improve lives, impact apartments, and there's a whole bunch of fun activities I do at my properties that brings it all together. So to share that, I think, is my purpose.
Mhm.
And that's a big piece of what I do. I think as a mom, I also homeschooled my son for 2 years. So the whole educator and needing to share knowledge, not to keep those secrets because I want you
Yeah.
to avoid the mistakes I made. I think that's my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've
Wow.
seen you on some pretty big stages. I mean, the conference we were at last weekend, you were one of the speakers. And, I was at Sumrock a year and a half ago, and you were one of the speakers there too. So, congratulations on all your success and, being on those big stages.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's about being relatable and helping, especially people who haven't done this before, come across and take that leap so
Mhm.
that they can collapse timeframes again, like I said before, to be successful faster, not wait 10 years to do this. You could do it in a year or two.
Yep. Absolutely. All
I
right.
love that. I love that. And just continue on from there. A couple short questions and then a little bit of longer question. The first short question, what are some of the podcasts that you're listening to right now? I love listening to podcasts when I'm driving. So
I like Hunter Thompson's cash flow podcast. And then I also like Rod Cleve's lifetime cash flow podcast. I like Whitney Sewell. I like the podcast by a lot of other smaller syndicators. Eileen Pack has one. I forget the name exactly of her show. I like the one by Sujata. I like, of course, Brian's because, again, it gives you a newbie and an experienced person's perspective, and the questions change each time. So it's always interesting and fun. So sometimes I have a 3-hour drive to go see my daughter in college. And so I post a variety of these podcasts.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you want to learn. The really bigger motivational ones also, you can never get tired of listening to Jesse Itzler, Ed Milet, etc. kind of people. So when I need that inspiration, when I'm down, I go back and re-listen to some of their episodes because that's really helpful. I'm not tired. I feel outstanding, right? Those are some of Jesse Itzler's words. And so sometimes I need to hear that again when I'm feeling down or exhausted. So it just depends on a variety. And I can email you a list of podcasts as well, in addition to what I've already mentioned.
I actually haven't listened to a lot of multifamily podcasts recently. And I think, granted, I record, 3 episodes like this a week. So I guess this is my podcast fix, but I've got a church one that I listen to, a macroeconomic one that I listen to, Hal Elrod's podcast, and then Masters of Scale from the LinkedIn founder. Those are the 4 on my rotation, and it's really the things that for me, it's the things that I need right now, more than anything else. Scaling is a big topic right now, and so that's one of the podcasts I listen to. Hal Elrod, mindset and routines, and that's one thing that I'm definitely working on. So that's how I choose it. And it's the things that I'm working on.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And I've recently been getting a little bit more into macroeconomics, and I love that. And I love how you're tying into it's the whole supply and demand. They're very simple concepts, they get into very detailed oriented and all these kinds of things. But I think it's just keeping it simple and applying it to what we're doing or whatever business you're doing. I think that's really cool. But yeah, so another question that I did have, you mentioned scaling, and this is one of the questions that I've had for a while is, as an aspiring investor, for a long time, we're thinking, okay, let's get this deal, let's get it going, let's get it rolling, let's get it rolling. But my biggest question is, what do we do afterwards, and how do we scale it hypothetically up to having $1 billion under asset management?
Yeah, I would just break that down into smaller tasks, right? Anything that seems like a big task. If I have to have $1 billion in assets in 5 years, usually it's not really a linear function. Usually the first few deals are the slowest, and then it goes up exponentially. So I would say that you figure out what are the biggest roadblocks and what are the biggest things that you can do yourself. So if I wanted $1 billion in assets in 5 years, I would want to get to at least 100 million in my first 18 months or so. And so how do I get there? What can I offer? What can somebody else do? So figure out your partnerships, your roadblocks, and then find people with complementary skills so that your weakness is covered by their strengths. Usually capital is always a roadblock. So how are you going to get to that? So if you wanted to acquire a $50 million property, nowadays you have to raise even 25 to 30 million of that yourself. So start first with a smaller property, figure out what works and what doesn't in the capital raising world, partner with people whose strength is raising capital if that is your weakness, so you cover the other bases. So you get your first deal that's maybe only 10 million, your next deal is 20 million, and so on. And each time you figure out, oh, this capital partner is ideal for this. I have a strong relationship with this broker, so I can get this deal awarded, etc. So break it down into those steps. And once you get to the 100 or 200 million dollars worth of assets under management, the rest of it is just repeat, rinse and repeat. But like I said, scale by doing larger and fewer deals to get to that 1 billion number.
I would add, I mean, the same thing, and this is something, once again, I've been looking into in the last couple of days or a couple of weeks is, look for consultants, look for coaches that can help you get there as well. I mean, there's a lot of coaches in the beginning stages of the industry, in the beginning stages of multifamily that can get you to pass that first hump. But, scaling is a whole different thing. You have to have the right people around you, the right procedures and processes. I would say, at some point, if you want to get to that $1 billion asset management, in addition to everything Sandhya said, if you want to get to that point, at some point, maybe bring in somebody to help you scale, make sure your internal systems and procedures. With the former partnership I was in, we hit our limit because we did not have really well designed and fine-tuned procedures, and we hit our scaling limit, and it was south of 1,000 units and south of 100 million in assets under management. But I think that's also very important to the scaling as well.
And I just want to tag on to Brian's idea, which is if you see somebody who's done $1 billion of assets under management and get introduced to them, see how you can help them. Maybe get involved in a very tiny piece of their large deal and see how they do it, right? If you want to, for example, figure out how to do something at your mom and pop level, go see how the Walmarts of the world do it, right? Or the Amazons of the world. And so it's the same way. How do they organize? How do they manage their inventory? How do they do their supply chain, etc.? It's the same way. How do these guys scale? Do they have the same thing, like, train a VA to do the task that you do today by recording yourself in a Loom video so that no matter who it is, you can keep hiring VAs to do that. And then you free your time. So free your time so that you only do the highest level tasks and you outsource everything else that you don't want to do, or which is like a, $20 per hour kind of task, so that you can do the $500 and $1,000 per hour tasks.
Love it.
Wow. I love that. And I feel like that's something that I've been hearing a lot of is, surrounding yourself with the right people, getting in the proximity, of the people that are doing the deals, making sure, they're doing big things like that. Just being in that proximity really pulls you forward. And I love that. I really love that. Second thing I think you mentioned was scaling and having systems in place. I think that's really, really interesting. I just keep hearing that. Always set up systems, keep it going. And then moving on from there, I know you mentioned, reaching bottlenecks. So how do you recognize when you're in your own way? Because I mean, I'm me, and how do I get that outside looking in to know that, I'm in my own way. I need to get out. I need to hire some VAs. I need to do this, get some other people around me.
One of the things to recognize is that no one can do anything as perfectly as you syndrome, right? Maybe you accept it at 80% efficiency. 80% perfect is okay. Let a VA do it or let an assistant do it so that it frees up your time, right? And have an outsider who you respect in the business come and assess what you do. So record what you do on a day-to-day level for a whole week, operating just the way you are right now. Right there, you will yourself be able to say, what's inefficient about my time for an entire week? From that, distinguish the things you love to do and the things that get you the most impact. And then say, how does that translate to me serving my customers, who are my residents and my investors, as an example? And then everything else that you've been doing, figure out how you can outsource it. By, again, Loom videos, so writing out the process, et cetera, train somebody else to do it. So a newbie, for example, bringing in, as I'm a lead syndicator, if a newbie wants to do certain aspects of asset management, I say, okay, here's your criteria, write out the scope of work, go get 3 bids, come back, let's pick a vendor. But I outsource that to my newbie syndicator. So they learn how to do that, and it frees up my time. So that's an example.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you don't have your systems right, if you don't have your procedures right, you will feel pain. Okay. There is friction involved. Okay.
Mhm,
And it will stop growth. So if you
mhm.
feel like you're spinning your wheels, okay, you probably have a systems problem. All right. If you feel like you're banging your head into a brick wall, you probably have a systems problem. And that's kind of what we realized. And that kind of spurred me leaving the company that I was with was, we had a systems problem, and it wasn't getting fixed, it wasn't getting addressed, and it kept us from scaling. But in a lot of times, I think if you really sit back and think about it, if you're spinning your wheels, running into a brick wall, you have a systems problem.
I
Yeah.
love that. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or you're
So
burning the candle on both ends and you're working,
Mhm.
12, 14, 16-hour days. It's like you've got to outsource some of it.
Yeah.
Many of those are probably $5, $10, $20 an hour tasks that
Yeah.
need to be outsourced.
And I love what Sandhya said about, recording yourself doing certain things on Loom, or I actually use Zoom. I hit my share screen record on Zoom, so I don't have to use a second app. But I do that for my virtual assistants, and I think that the first thing that I outsourced was podcast editing, because it took me forever, and
Mhm.
I was pulling my hair out and it wasn't very good. And, it was one of those things where I realized I was banging my head against a wall. And it's like, I need to outsource this. And I taught a couple of people how to edit podcasts. And it was exactly that. It was me recording myself doing it. And now if, I hope my podcast editor stays with me for, as forever, as long as I own the podcast. But, every time I switch podcast editors, I didn't have to, redo the training materials. Like, here's the video I recorded 6 months ago. It's still good. So anyway, we are about out of time. So one question for each of you to close things up. Sandhya, you go first. How do listeners learn more about you?
You can visit my website, engineered-capital.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or of course, you can get to me through Brian.
Woo!
Brian
All right.
Briscoe, the host.
Absolutely. And Brian, how can listeners learn more about you?
Sure. You can contact me at brobles@mucapitalinvestments.com. Just send me an email. I'd love to get to know more about you.
Awesome. And hey, thanks to both of you for coming on the show today. Great, great, great conversation. I love it. I think this is going to be like an instant classic. So appreciate you for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call the Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.